Welcome to Bless His Kitchen, another episode here on a Thursday. We're so happy that you're joining us and that we have Keith Hamilton with us today, a parishioner of ours. He has a great story, great human being. I love him and his wife, and I had dinner with them recently, and I'm so glad you're joining us.
This is great. Thank you for the invitation.
We have a salad that we're going to start with. There's just like a little arugula with tomatoes and a burrata cheese, and then we got some chicken nuggets. I don't know if you guys are following me, if you're watching me, but we had the recipe for, I gave them this like Chick-fil-A secret recipe. You can go on Google and you get this, there's these websites where you find secret recipes like Wendy's chili and everything.
So that's amazing.
So they had this recipe for Chick-fil-A nuggets.
Done.
So I gotta try this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're gonna have that for lunch and then just like a little dessert. But let's start with a prayer in the name of the Father and of the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for this day, for bringing us together. We ask your blessing upon this parish family, upon Keith, upon his wife, upon his good work, upon his health, upon this food we're about to receive, and bless those in a special way, those who go hungry today. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So cheers. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
To your health, and we'll explain that in a little bit, but
thank you.
Cheers to you.
Thank you very much.
It's good to have you. And then I'm just gonna, Bella, is that too loud, the music? It's too loud? It's like right on, and so... But dig in. I mean, one of the things, Keith, you'll see is, and if you watch this show, a lot of times it's not really lunch with my pastor. It's watch my pastor eat. So feel free to eat and talk as you're going along. But I'm hungry, so I'm going to start eating. But one of the things that I always like to do is I always like to kind of let the people just know you a little bit, because they'll see you at Mass. They'll see you and your wife at Mass, but maybe not know you. So maybe just give us a little of, who is Keith Hamilton? Which sounds like a founding father, but
my wife says when we have kids, we're absolutely not allowed to name one of them Alexander, because Alexander Hamilton, she won't let me do it. So I drive her crazy by instead going to like old Roman names like Octavius Cato, and so I'm thinking if I go far enough in the Roman direction, I'll eventually be able to swing back to Alexander Hamilton. It'll seem more normal. My name is Keith Hamilton. I have been a parishioner here since I moved here in 2014. I come from, I was born out west in Nevada, but I moved a lot as a kid, and we settled for the longest stretch of time in Baltimore, right outside of Baltimore, Maryland, in Harford County. And I lived there for about 14 years. Mm-hmm. And the true story of how I ended up down here was I came down for work once or twice, and I loved it. And I was at a networking meeting in DC, in the Beltway at the Ritz-Carlton near Tyson's. And I was looking out the window as it started to snow at rush hour. And I said, getting home in DC go-home traffic in the snow is going to be 3 to 4 hours. And I said, I could just take a quick ride to Reagan and fly to Miami and be home in 2 hours.
Yeah,
I said, why do I live here?
Yeah.
And so a week later, after the snow thawed, I refused to dig my car out. And after the snow thawed, I fit everything I could into my Honda and drove down here. And I had one friend, and I said, can I crash at your place for a little while?
Wow.
And, and then I stayed there for a couple of months, and then that's how I got to Miami.
That is excellent. Well, I mean, I'm sure you're happy with that decision. A wife came out of that decision.
Yeah, the best wife I could ask for, and Miami's paradise. I tell people actually, I used to joke. I'd say if Miami ever gets Wawa, then I think God will move here. And then Wawa came to Miami. So you'll never see.
So I think God moved here.
I think he did. He must be. And so you'll never get me to leave, because I've got Wawa, I've got my wife, I've got Miami. I couldn't ask for anything more.
I agree. I mean, I was born in Miami. I'm a Floridian, so I happen to agree with you. But so tell us a little bit how you so you came down to Miami. Mm-hmm. You start working in Miami. How did you meet your wife?
Well, actually, funny enough, I was working down here. I travel a crazy amount for work, and I would go to Titanic pretty regularly, the brewery down the street. And there was a Focus missionary here who knew my wife and her friend, her best friend, and they would hang out and they would go to Titanic. So I was leaving one day with a bunch of books in my arm because I read anywhere I go. And they were walking in, and I kind of scared her in the parking lot because it was in the evening, and I was like, is that Gabe? Is that my friend? And so I'm like looking between cars. I'm seeming kind of sketchy.
And why is this guy looking at me?
Exactly. And so then when they realized I knew Gabe and we were friends, then that helped them to be a little less weirded out. But so I met her that night, and then I found out that she had been coming she just moved back from UF. And she had been coming to YAG events and was getting part of the community. So I started running into her more frequently
through the young adults.
Through the young adult community here.
Yeah.
And then that's a few months later, I was going to ask her out, and she came back from Seek and told me that Father Gabe of the CFRs had told her that she needed to stay out of relationships for a little while. And I was like, well...
Do you have his number? Let me call him.
I was like, well, you can't argue with Father Gabe if you know the CFRs. And so then a little while later, I asked her out, and we dated and got married, and the rest is history, as they say.
Which I love your marriage. You guys have a solid marriage, truly centered on Christ. I was blessed to be at your home recently. You guys invited me over for dinner, and I just like the dynamic between the two of you, the chemistry, the love that you guys have. You have certainly gone through a lot in the last year and a half here, and which you'll go through, but it just shows how it's edifying to me how this has built you guys up to a stronger marriage, you know, which is amazing.
You know, it's funny, before I met Catalina, I had done a lot of work and spent a lot of time in the business coaching and personal development kind of areas. You know, public speakers, life coaches, business coaches, relationship coaches, reading a lot of books on the topics. And one thing that my wife and I both talk about a lot is the importance of really healing, and the importance of really going through formation before you get married, and getting really clear on like areas of woundedness and areas of hurt, and going through the area of healing so you don't bring that baggage in to a marriage. And I'm really grateful to say that that's just how she's always lived her life, is to be a very devout person and a very faithful person. And she and I spent a lot of time focusing on healing from, you know, just things in life that happen, breakups and bad relationships and family dynamics and disappointments and business challenges. And so I think we both came into the marriage at the best time in our lives up to that point, where we had done the most work and had gone through the most formation, and we're both, you know, doing well in our, you know, she was starting her career, I was doing well with my business. And so it was a great time to start, and then pretty quickly things went a little crazy. But I think the reason that we've gotten through the last year and a half so well is because we came into the marriage in a really healthy, healthy place.
And I think that one of the things that I like to tell parishioners here, and people who are not parishioners who really need to get involved in their parish, is that you, looking back, can be a great testament to say, listen, our time at the parish, our involvement with the different ministries, our community that we love really truly helped us in ways that I cannot even explain. Because you never know when you're going to need the Lord or your community. Everything's going great. You know, and all of a sudden something happens, and it's just kind of shakes you to the root, and it's incredible. There's
an author named Thomas Friedman, and I think he writes for the Times, or I forget where, but he's a very well-known author. And in one of his books, he quotes Gabriel Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. And in it, the summary, he says that what I take away from this passage in 100 Years of Solitude is that if we forget that we can forget everything that's unimportant, our phone numbers and our addresses from years gone by, but if we forget that there is a God, and if we forget who we belong to, something profoundly human in us will be lost. The whole quote he's talking about is faith and community. And community has been a godsend. When I first moved here, the first place that I lived there was a men's house over by where the Rose Lodge is.
Right.
And there were some SPO missionaries and a couple college kids, and they needed a young adult. And so I lived there for a year after I moved out from my friend's house. And then from there, it was a friend in community who found a room in a friend of theirs' house, and that's where I lived for the next year. So I didn't know anybody. I don't have any family here. So community is how I, found the first couple of places, instead of just going and getting an apartment in a building where I knew nobody. Instead, finding places to live where I was with people in community and with good friends and with friends of friends, and then eventually meeting Catalina through community. And then when everything went crazy in this last year and a half, community was a huge part of us getting through it. People bringing communion, people bringing food, people helping get us around, people doing the prayers. Hands down. We're very convinced that a miracle took place, and the prayers, absolutely. So community is where I think you can hope. Community is a place I think you can give God the opportunity to introduce you to a spouse if that's his plan, though you don't go there looking for it. But I think it's a great place to potentially meet a spouse among many other options out there. But also, community helps you in your marriage and helps you in life. It's a huge thing.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that I try to tell my young adults and even people who are in the pews who I see that could benefit from community, could benefit from the young adult group is that when you're surrounded with like-minded people, that's going to make your life a lot easier. It's also going to help the two of you center on that one road where it's not two roads or but you're all on that one road to holiness and walking together, and it just makes sense. Dating is hard as it is, and and marriage is hard, but when you really find someone who is similar, it's incredible. Like-mindedness, a devotion to the Lord, a desire to seek holiness, desire to go to Mass, all of that really helps the marriage. It changes the dynamic of a relationship.
I agree. I think that it's easy for people to be afraid of putting both feet into faith, and they want to keep one foot in faith and one foot I still, go out to the bars I used to go out to, and maybe I'll meet someone there, and I still hang out with the people that I used to hang out with, and, I've got friends there. And they don't realize that if the friends and the community in your life are people who are neutral to faith or hostile to faith, it's very rare that you will bring them up.
That's right.
And it's much more likely. And when I started my business in DC, I had mentors who were very hostile to faith. And I had friends who were very hostile to faith, and I had a falling away for a few years.
Yeah.
And when I chose to go back to living the faith, all of those people, their connections, their networks, their support dried up and disappeared.
That's right. It just fades away.
And so, I think there has to be a point where you choose, I'm in.
Yeah.
And that means I want my community to be people who are in also. I think that's an incredibly important decision to make early in life, so that your community builds you up instead of being a community that tries to pull you away from what's true and good and beautiful.
That's powerful. I agree with you 100%. So I want to get to what we're kind of like alluding to, because people are saying, what are they talking about? You had a scare in your life and you weren't feeling well, and you couldn't kind of figure out, why am I not feeling well? And in fact, some doctors kind of strayed you in down a path that wasn't the right path. But I want to allow you to explain it, because you have a powerful story.
Yeah. To say it's been a crazy year and a half would be an understatement. But, my wife and I had gone through a personal loss just a few months into the marriage, and then shortly after that, I started to have double vision and headaches and neck pain. And when I was flying to Germany, and I was traveling, and I was working, till 4 or 5 in the morning, staring at my computer. And when I started to research the symptoms I was having, everything came back as eye strain, severe eye strain. Sleeping in chairs, not, bad neck support, sleeping on airplanes, and then being in front of a computer hunched over all day. And so I went and got my eyes checked, and that eye doctor said, yeah, you have a minor vision issue that you need glasses, and since you're working without glasses, it's causing severe strain because your eyes are trying to adjust based on the glasses that you don't have. And so we went through this 5 or 6 week process that is almost comedic, in the sense of they sent glasses and then said they made them wrong, and so I sent them back, and there was another week delay, and then they sent them, and now I had double vision instead of blurry vision, so they said they needed prism, so they sent the order in for those, and that was another week, and then those came in, but they didn't have prism in them, so they had to send it back and order again. So this 5 or 6 week cycle of delays.
And what are you experiencing? You're experiencing double vision, any headaches?
Horrible headaches, double vision, migraines, occasionally nausea, which I didn't connect the dots, because you don't think of those things causing
any loss of appetite or anything?
Not that, but trouble sleeping, insomnia. I was staying up till, my whole life I've been a night owl, so it's normal for me to stay up till 2 or 3 working, and then sleep in till 8 or 9 or 10.
Right.
But it was getting to a point where I was staying up till 9 or 10 a.m. and then finally getting tired and sleeping until 3 or 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
Wow.
Which, as owning my own business, I was able to make the schedule work, but it's not a good business. It's not a good schedule. But again, there were things that I just chalked up to. I've always been a night owl, and I just messed up my sleep schedule with all this international travel. And so I kept disconnecting the dots, and so finally I wasn't even driving anymore because of the double vision. And Catalina's mom had a day off from school. She's a school counselor here in Miami. And she said, I'm going to take you to see our eye doctor to get a second opinion. And I almost said no, because I always assume the best. I do not go to worst case scenarios. I go to, what's the most rational, easy explanation, Occam's
And so by then you're still waiting for these glasses that haven't come.
Correct. And
so you almost said no. It's like, well, let me wait till these glasses come. They're already coming. Maybe that's what's going to be.
Correct. And so with that happening, we go to see this other eye doctor. And he within 5 minutes said, there's nothing wrong with your eyes. This isn't a vision issue. This is a health issue.
Wow.
So he has me walk across.
Did you get scared at that?
Well, I didn't, because I always assume, Occam's razor, the least amount of assumptions necessary. Yeah. So I said, well, what could it be? He said, high blood pressure. And I said, oh, well, okay, yeah, I've gained some weight over the years, need to, lose some weight. That makes sense. So he wanted me to get my blood pressure, so we walked to the other end of the building. The kid he sent me with to do it didn't know how to take blood pressure, so I had walked across the whole building.
Dangerous.
I was standing, and then my arm was at my side, but I was leaning against the wall. And he didn't give me any time from walking till taking it, so it came back really high. And I didn't freak out, but my wife and her best friend, who's a nurse, were like, this is an emergency. So I called a friend who's a doctor, and the doctor said, well, you're not life or death, but go get checked out, quickly, soon. So the next morning, my wife, being a saint, rushed phone call after phone call till she found a doctor at Baptist who would squeeze me in that morning for a physical. And then that doctor was not really taking it that seriously. And the doctor was like, well, we'll send you for some blood work and then for another eye exam and then. And my wife is the most gentle, soft, non-assertive person in the world. And she went, when will we check neurological causes? And the doctor was like, way down the road. Like, that's the last thing we'll look at. And I said, how long will this all take? She said, a couple weeks to get all these different tests done.
Wow.
But at that point,
when I would already feeling bad. When
I would lay down on a pillow to try to sleep, I would get a screeching in my ears that would last for about 5 minutes. That would cause physical pain. The screeching was so loud. And it would take 5 minutes for it to subside. And then if I rolled over, it would happen again. So I was barely sleeping. So my wife said, he's in agony. We can't wait weeks for an answer. And she said, I want a prescription, a referral for a CT. And the doctor's like, no, that's last case. We waited there for 2 hours until the doctor sent her nurse in with a referral.
And why do you think the hesitation?
Well, I think because just like I was always assuming that there's a million other more reasonable explanations than a severe one, and you try to rule out the things that make the fewest assumptions before you go to the worst case scenario. And so I think the doctor was just doing the same thing, and I think the doctor was trying to not terrify us that it could be some crazy thing. Like, there's a lot of reasonable explanations. So we went and got the CT that night, and the CT tech goes, I am not allowed to tell you what's on the scan, only your doctor can, but you should have done this a long time ago.
Wow.
Which is the worst thing you could be told.
That would be scary.
But the best thing, because my wife had a little bit of a meltdown. We had her dad come and take her to the house and calm down, and her mom took me to the ER that night, and I was in brain surgery the next morning.
Wow.
9 p.m. I go to the ER, 10 a.m. the next morning I'm in brain surgery.
Well, did they tell you that night what was going on, or? They
did, but I think I was in such a state of shock around all this, and I also have a phobia of needles and IVs, and I had IVs and needles everywhere. So I was very worked up, and so we thought the doctor came out and said, you have a brain tumor that is 3 centimeters. So we're thinking tiny, a little tiny pea, and it's like, that's not good, but that's a small thing to fix. Like that's thank God it's not a massive. And they said it's in a really bad area of the brain and a really hard area to get to. They said, but it's blocking your spinal fluid from draining, and so all your spinal fluid is building up in your head and putting massive pressure on your brain, so your brain is swelling. So it was life or death. So that's why, 10 hours later, I was in surgery to drill a different drainage route so the fluid could drain properly, and then to biopsy the tumor. But right before we went in to the surgery, and I think maybe Father Tran, but Michelle was there and a few other people had shown up. My family was still flying because my family lives across the country. And so Catalina's family was there, Catalina was there, and then I think Michelle had come at that point, but they were reading the what can happen during this surgery warning list. And he's like, you have to understand, you have a 5, I think he said sonometer, but he said a different, not centimeter, he said a different type of measurement. And he's like, it's a golf ball that's in your brain in this really deep, dangerous
So it's part. Not a pea.
Not at all. And he's like, this surgery, you can have memory issues, you can have vision issues, you can have speech issues, you can have physical impairment, you can have disability in terms of physical mobility loss. You can have, he's listing through all the what could happen. And then he's like, there's a 2% chance that you could die on the operating table. And so, again, like just this crazy thing. So we ended up having the surgery done. And, praise God, I came out of it with no permanent side effects, except I still have double vision, but they said that could still heal over time. And I was in the hospital for 10 days. And during that time, Michelle had organized food deliveries. Michelle had organized people to be visiting on a rotating schedule so Catalina could get a break, people to drive my family around once they got in town back and forth from where we were living to the hospital. I mean, we had community nonstop throughout the entire thing. And then I referenced earlier that we think a miracle happened because when the doctor was doing the brain surgery, he said, this tumor is very fibrous, and I think he told my wife this, I never heard this, but he said, I think it's a bad tumor. And he said, your husband's probably going to need open brain surgery, the most dangerous of all the possibilities we had been prepped for. And so we were expecting the worst kind of, or my wife was, but she didn't tell me that, thank God. The second day after the surgery, I had a drain coming out of my head. I was in the CCU, the critical care unit, and we sent Catalina home to take a nap, take some vitamins. Michelle was in the room, so I wasn't alone. And I just said to Catalina, I said, on the way home, stop by Our Lady of Lourdes and just go to adoration for a few minutes for you and for me.
Wow.
And so my wife will tell you that that's the last thing she wanted to do. And she did. She went. And when she touched the water, at that moment, I was in the hospital bed and I looked at Michelle and I said, something just happened. Like, I feel like the swelling is way less. I feel like the pain is way less. I feel like my vision is a little better. I feel like my head is hurting less. I said, it just feels like everything just got like 70% better in a second. And Michelle goes, huh. And at that moment, Catalina calls, literally the same second, and says, hey, I just left the grotto at Our Lady of Lourdes. I brought a little bit of the holy water. I grabbed a little bit of the holy water. I'm going to bring it, and I'm on my way back.
Powerful.
So the second she touched the water, I had this experience.
Of course.
Healing, and the biopsy came back as the best possible type of tumor, despite what the surgeon saw and touched when he did the biopsy. Despite what he saw and touched, the tumor came back as the perfect, ideal kind that doesn't need surgery and responds to chemo and radiation. And then I had 6 months of chemo and radiation, and now the scans are clean.
Amen.
It was a year.
Praise be Jesus Christ. I mean, that's the power of Christ right there, healing and through the power of faith.
Absolutely.
Wow. Incredible. Incredible.
And the importance of community, because that miracle took place, and God could have done that miracle however he wanted, but Catalina being able to even go to Lourdes and go to adoration and touch the water was because Michelle was there, so I wasn't alone, and had people cycling in and out to visit and taking care of my family and driving my family around. So it gave Catalina that freedom to go home and take a nap and get some vitamins and rest, and then go to Lourdes and then come back.
Incredible.
Yeah, we've been blessed with a lot of miracles.
Your story is, I love it. It's fascinating. It is, I hate that you went through it, but how do you feel about that? Now, I know you've told your story to others, but what do you think about it now that some time has passed? What do you think about it?
I think...
Not to get too heavy during lunch.
Yeah. No, the story is a joyful one in hindsight. I think the comedian Stephen Colbert is telling the story about how he lost most of his family as a child, and he references Tolkien, who says, aren't all of God's punishments also gifts? And not that I think my sickness was a punishment in any way, but the things, Colbert says, the thing that I wish most hadn't happened to me is also the thing that was one of the biggest gifts in my life. It's a weird oxymoron. It's a weird contradiction, paradox. And I feel very much the same way. I don't enjoy having double vision. I still have some brain fog. I only was well enough to get back to work about a month and a half ago. This all started in August of last year.
Right.
So that's over a year of laying on a couch or a bed doing nothing. So I don't love that it happened, and it was an incredibly challenging and difficult time. But the blessings and the fruit that have come from it and the way God has worked through it has been incredible in my marriage, in the miracle that he gave us of healing, in showing us the power of community and that how loved we are and how real our community is. The importance of the sacraments. Right before I went in for surgery, I was waiting for a priest, and the surgeons wanted to just start the surgery, right, like get me in the room, get it started. They said, we can't keep waiting. And I wanted confession, and I wanted anointing of the sick, which in my mind, I was actually thinking of it as last rites. I was thinking of it as I could die in here, but I didn't say that to my wife. But I wanted those two sacraments more than anything. Yeah. And the anesthesiologist, for some reason, looked at the team and said, what he's waiting for is more important than what we're going to do. We can wait. And they waited till the priest came, and I got confession and I got anointing.
It gets me emotional. That's So powerful.
That it was a gift. It was a gift because the rest of the team didn't want to wait anymore. And so, that's another gift of the suffering we went through, is recognizing how real the sacraments are. And also that, as cliche as it is, that tomorrow's not promised. And if you're kind of skirting the faith and living a foot in and a foot out, thinking, yeah, right now I've got to do some things to build my business or to find a spouse or to, I have to kind of find other ways because I don't think that I'm going to get what I need if I just live, fully in. And so you kind of live this foot in, foot out because you're thinking, once I have my spouse or once my business is doing good or once I'm financially free or financially stable or once I have my career, then I can focus on that faith thing.
But isn't that how life is? It's until something like this, it's kind of, when things are good, it's like, well, who needs God? It's like, yeah, God is one thing among many things, and yeah, we'll go to church, but it's when you're really faced with a tragedy or a loss or a health issue that you say, wait a minute, this relationship that I have been fostering, this relationship that I have been, is now what's helping me through this,
Yep.
Because you never know when you need to tap into that relationship where you need to kind of even now, okay, Lord, I need you to carry me now.
Yeah.
The
my faith has always been a very intellectual faith. I never have had profound experiences in prayer. I rarely am in deep consolation. I'm normally either just neutral or in some, area of desolation spiritually. Prayer has always been a very dry experience for me. My faith has always been kept very intellectual. In high school, I read the Weigel biography of John Paul II, and it made me feel like John Paul was like James Bond. And my faith stayed strong because I thought he was so cool.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize how brilliant he was.
Right.
And I started to respect his intellect. And I started to realize that faith is you can make a legitimate argument for faith from a logical and reasonable standpoint and a scientific standpoint. And it's not this thing that's fighting science and logic and reason. And then the trajectory just continued. My faith was always intellectual. And when we were going through this, it was the first time that, I had experienced a personal miracle. We went into the hospital for that surgery on the 6-year anniversary of when I walked into Lourdes in France. To start my Camino. Wow. And so it was the first time that I had experienced a miracle personally in my own life, but also my prayer life had always been a bartering with God. I'm trying to build this business. If I can support these ministries. I'm trying to do this thing, and if I can be charitable in this way. I'm trying to help this candidate or this business, and if they succeed, they're going to do this good stuff. And so my faith, my prayer had always been a barter of like, God, here's how I'm trying to build your kingdom. Here's how I'm trying to serve. Here's what I need you to do to help me do that. And I always knew that wasn't the way it's supposed to work, but because I always had such a dry experience of prayer, that was the most I could reliably do. And the process of getting sick and going into a surgery where you might not come out, and chemo and radiation, which might not work and are going to be brutal as you go through them, and side effects that might never go away, there's no bartering. There's nothing that I can offer God that I can do. I'm stuck on a couch. I can't. If I take a shower, I need 5 hours to sleep afterwards because the 15 minutes of standing is I'm done for the day. And so when you're in a place where you are that dependent on your spouse and your community to take care of you,
it's humbling.
It's incredibly humbling, and you start to understand what a lot of the saints and mystics wrote about in terms of childlike faith and seeing God as a loving father. Because the way I shared it is I'm like a little kid who all I can do is say, I'm hungry, feed me, pick me up, carry me, help me, where's my toy, where's something I want. Little children can't give anything back to us through their actions. They just ask for what they need, and as loving parents, we give our children what they need. Even though we can't say, fine, I'm going to give you your toy, but go get the groceries for me from Publix. it's a 4-year-old, can't do that, you know? So there's no barter. It's just, as a parent, you just love the child and you give the child what it needs. And that was very much my experience in prayer over the year and a half, was constantly just having to ask for things and not being able to tell God, if you help me with this, here's what I'm going to do for the church and for the kingdom.
I am your beloved.
Yep.
I need you.
That's it. You know, Dad picked me up. You know, just this childlike dependence and begging. You know, and not
how beautiful. You know, it's what I tried to convey. It's what I tried. You know, and I love how you put it into this. It started with the intellectual. You were attracted to it. You were a very smart man, and in it you were attracted to the reason, and how faith then builds upon reason, and you're able to see it concretely, the love of the Father for his Son, who wants nothing but your heart, doesn't want your work, doesn't want, he wants you to work for the kingdom of heaven, but he wants your heart and just your pure love for him. But I want to just switch gears a little bit, because I'm very fascinated with what you do and what you're trying to do with your work, with the finances on the. Can you explain a little bit about that? Because I really love what you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna encourage some, if there's any business leaders or CEOs watching us that they listen to this model that you're trying to get going.
Thank you for bringing it up. So when I was, a couple years ago, I ran something called the Great Commission Summit in Palm Springs, California. And I brought together 40 amazing Catholic leaders from different businesses, ministries, nonprofits. We had Bishop Dumas from Haiti. We had an incredible 40 people, and the CFRs, the Sisters of Life. And we just brought them out into the desert at a beautiful ranch. And we just had 3 days where we prayed together and we discussed how the church can re-engage culture. And one of the big areas that came up from those discussions was that if you look at the Jewish community or the Mormon community, they support their entrepreneurs in an amazing way. If you become a doctor and you open a practice, everybody who needs your services switches to your practice because they want to support a doctor from the community. If you are become a real estate agent, anyone who needs to buy or sell their houses in the community looks to do it from you because they want to support somebody. And if you're an entrepreneur, people connect you to the capital needed to launch your business or your idea, and the mentors to do it. If you want to get an MBA from Brigham Young University, it's $10,000.
Wow.
That's it, because the church feels like we need MBAs. We need people who understand business and who want to succeed in the world, which helps us to share our story to the world. The Catholic Church doesn't have any model like that. It's not good about that. It used to be historically. I mean, that model is historically all of your artists and your scientists. Right. They were paid for by the church, right, who paid for it by the businesses who were patrons of the church, and those businesses were supported by. So there was an ecosystem.
Right.
That ecosystem doesn't exist anymore. And so what I want to do and what I'm trying to do is to is to launch what's called a venture studio model fund. Venture studio means you're taking the best of private equity and venture capital and the accelerator or studio model, and you're merging them. You're helping companies go through a school, an accelerator, to see if their business idea on the other end of that accelerator is a good idea and can grow and scale and be profitable and successful. And if it is, normally outside investors come in and try to invest in that company. In this model,
and just so that people are understanding what you're saying, how is it different from venture capitalist?
Because in this model, it's all combined. It's not normally your venture capital or your early stage investors come in after the accelerator process. They invest, and then they are mostly hands-off.
Right.
In this model, the fund is inside of the studio. And so if the company makes it through the accelerator process, you have the money yourself to invest and continue mentoring, continue coaching, continue helping. And you can do other things like take the back end systems like the marketing and accounting and centralize all of that to take it off the entrepreneur's plate, the business's plate. But basically you create a community where you provide the capital, the mentoring, the connections, the network, and you grow with that entrepreneur, you grow with that business. And we want to have the businesses that receive capital as well as the investors that invest to come to an annual retreat to make sure that there's spiritual formation, because one of the temptations as you succeed in life is that you get pulled away from faith. So we don't want to make successful companies just for those CEOs to lose, their faith because they're so focused on business. So we want the full cycle of mentorship.
Well, you were talking about changing the culture.
Yes.
And I think if it starts from the top, you're going to change the culture, even if it's a business. And those who you work with, your employees, your staff, you can really affect a great change in society and in the local community. Mm-hmm. That's why when we first started talking about this, I'm very attracted about this idea. So tell us a little bit more of how it works in the sense that locally, and how do we know a little bit more about this?
So what I have to do is kind of soft circle and begin finding investors who are willing to be a part of this.
That's the stage that you're at.
This
right
cycle,
now.
yes. I had been doing that before I got sick on a national scale, flying around hosting dinners and lunches around the country where I would have people bring any Catholic entrepreneur or investor that they knew just to get to know each other and build those communities. And then when I got sick, everything for the last year and a half has so I'm kind of rebuilding now because we were just about to launch the fund before I got sick.
And what's the fund called again?
Prolific.
Prolific. So the fund manages the monies that come in through these entrepreneurs.
Correct.
And then the school kind of vets the people who bring in and mentorship idea. And okay, so
there's I can give a couple of really great examples, and there's a lot of small Catholic products out there that are amazing. I'm wearing my socks, Sock Religious. They're these amazing dress socks with, this one has Saint Nicholas on it. They have John nice. Paul, they have Pope Francis. And there's another one called Catholic Beard Balm, which has these scents like incense.
For a guy with a beard?
For people with beards. And they're these small, little, tiny companies that actually are doing hundreds of thousands or breaking the $1 million mark in this very niche area. Most of them kind of stumbled on it. They did it as a fundraising idea or as like a little part-time business idea, and then it's grown and scaled. Finding companies like that, figuring out where they're struggling, where they need capital to grow, teaching them how, because many of them come from ministry or come from a background where they don't know how to grow a business or run a sales team or do marketing. So that would be a niche that could say we can provide the capital to help you grow, but we also can help provide the mentoring, the marketing expertise, the back-end accounting, the sales training, all these other things that a early stage entrepreneur might not have an expertise in, but the people managing the fund and the accelerator do have those expertise. They do have those tools. So right now I have to find investors willing to commit to get to a minimum of, I'd like the minimum to launch the fund to be 20 million for fund one. And then if the fund one is a successful result after 3 to 5 years, then we would try to do a second fund at a higher amount where we could also take on larger projects and larger investments. So that's the vision. That's what I'd like to do. And especially the focus on the spiritual and business formation of the people who put capital in and the people who run the businesses, so that we're not just creating a ecosystem of successful Catholics who can be generous and charitable, but we're making sure that in that process of becoming successful, that faith grows with it and isn't threatened by it. Because there's a lot of investors who are hostile to faith. And so when you're raising capital, there's a lot of times that you have to take money from somebody that you really don't want to be doing business with, but your company needs it to grow or survive.
And that gets very tricky, because you have these very good Catholic companies or CEOs who who love the Lord, who are trying to seek holiness and with their families and their business. But what happens is that when you get into desperate situations where you're looking for cash or you're trying to get investors, but then you may have investors who are investing in other businesses or in other enterprises that are not of God and are even involved in intrinsic evil. And so you have like very well purposed, beautiful business, and you may have an investor who is bringing in money that, you know, somebody could say is dirty money.
Correct.
And you may not even know it, and someone may bring it up to you, say, you have someone on your board, or you have someone, one of your investors, shareholders, who has the money that they're bringing in is from this.
Yep.
You know, and
there's a business partner of mine who has an advanced energy company, and some of the investors who had to come in from that are Silicon Valley, you know, individuals very hostile to faith, very hostile to the morality that we learn as Catholics and to the worldview that we have. And that's an incredibly tough position to be in. And if you ask any of these investors, any of these companies, if they would prefer to have an investor who shared their faith and values, it's a no-brainer. It's absolutely what they want. But what you find a lot of successful and wealthy Catholics, because there's no ecosystem for them to become a part of, there's no community, there's no culture, business culture to join and be a member of, you see a lot of wonderfully successful Catholic investors investing in more and more real estate, investing in more and more, you know, mutual funds or traditional investment vehicles with a financial advisor. All of those things are very good. Real estate is an incredible way to build wealth.
that's a safe.
But it doesn't impact the culture of the church.
That's right.
And it doesn't multiply. You know, I think spiritual multiplication, right? If you are that successful with that level of knowledge and the ability to be an investor, your one goal that should be on your heart is to figure out how to make 10 more of you inside the church, so that all the good that you do is multiplied by 10 because you mentor and invest in the next generation. Because nobody did what a lot of these older investors say is, no one did that for me. Exactly. That's why you need to start the cycle. You need to be the first one to make a commitment to multiply yourself and have 10 more of you 10 years from now who are doing
I like what
the
you
good
said,
that
the
you're doing.
ecosystem.
It is an ecosystem, and once it grows, it becomes exciting, and it's not something that you feel like you're starting. It's something you get the opportunity to join, because once it's matured, then there's plenty of capital to go around. There's plenty of mentors to support young entrepreneurs. Young entrepreneurs aren't scared to start businesses because they know that there's a faith-based community that is going to help them succeed. And if their idea is not a good one, help them find a good idea to pursue. And so when this idea matures, it becomes a really beautiful thing in the life of the church. Also because when you talk to the CFRs or the Sisters of Life, or even just a parish, the older generation that has money, that has resources, their children who don't have faith are going to fight tooth and nail against the gifts and the endowments they leave when they pass away to the church. Their children won't want that to happen because their children don't have faith or are hostile to faith. So we need an ecosystem of successful Catholic mentorship so that not only do we have more resources within the church, but so that we have new generations being built up of faithful, devout, successful Catholics who can continue to make donations, build new churches, fix old churches, support
All right, so how do we
ministries.
do this?
I think it has to start from,
Because it sounds great, and somebody's watching, they're saying, this sounds like a Shark Tank, but a Christian Shark Tank where remove the shark from it. And But like, how does this happen? Like, how do we get it going?
We have to pull together a fund first, because there has to be a central place where people know that they can go to look for capital from morally and spiritually aligned individuals to start or grow their companies. When that fund is there, then we need to build the accelerator. My network, I have the people with expertise in tech and marketing and accounting and all the business infrastructure things, but we need the physical space.
And these are all people who love the Lord and who are
good Christian people
faith,
that I've
good Christian people.
One is a deacon who's done tech companies out west that have been, he worked with Steve Case at AOL, he worked at Disney, he worked at all these large corporations, and then has done multiple
the expertise
successful.
Is there.
It's there, but it's completely disconnected. So all the Catholic entrepreneurs I know are doing their own thing.
Right, everybody's on their own.
And navigating this challenge of when they need capital, taking capital where they don't want to take it, but they need it to grow and scale. Or
I know what you're talking about. I have a friend of mine. I mentioned to you his name. He has a friend who is in California, and he has money because he wants to do a fund, and he's talking about the same thing. They don't want to be out on their own. They want to kind of create to change for the good. They want to change the culture and help others down the line, like you were saying, not just me all by myself, but bring others to kind of mentor them into business and to a way of life.
Yeah. Within any parish, there are probably dozens of young men and women who would love to start their own medical practice or their own law practice, or launch a new company, or scale their small business. But they don't know, when you've been in the Silicon Valley world, you know how to go find and get money, even though it's not from morally aligned people. You know where to look to find private equity. When you are somebody who was raised like I was in a family of, my dad worked for the government, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, there was no entrepreneurship in any direction on either side of the family except for one cousin who mentored me. And I would have never known where to go and find investors and capital and mentors. And so when you bring that to where it's a known entity, let's say inside of a diocese, hey, there's this fund and accelerator that's Catholic, and you can go to them, that person who's 25 and says, I have a really cool idea, but and I think it could be a great company, they have someone to go to and talk to about it, that they're not worried the idea is going to get stolen. Right. They're not worried that somebody's going to try to take 80% of the company from them to invest, and now they don't even own their own company. The very predatory private equity. And
they take advantage of the person. They take part of their company. In the long run, they find out, I don't even have a majority share in my company, and it's caused more harm than good. But because we don't have that much time, what is your background in the sense, how people say, well, this is a smart guy. What's your background?
So I started as a sales guy when I was 19. And within 2 years of doing sales, I realized that I loved the company, but what the sales opportunity there didn't reach the level of what I eventually wanted to have. And so I said, how could I help this company create a sales position where you sell way more and where it's a career position you want to stay with? And my cousin said, well, do they sell to the government? I said, no, they don't. So I moved to DC, and for 4 years I was living in DC, meeting with every political or business entity in the Beltway, trying to learn about government contracting and acquisition. And I built a really awesome network there. And I also got really good at sales. And so then I started doing sales consulting and sales coaching for businesses. And then I met a business partner of mine who has the advanced energy company, and I spent several years working with him on that, learning about private equity and raising capital and how to tech and environmental tech specifically. So for about 10 years, I've been in these spaces.
Getting ready for this moment. And
then it finally hit when I did this summit 2 years ago, where I had names that everybody would recognize in this room for the weekend in Palm Springs. And the common theme across the board was, we have 20 amazing ideas that came from this weekend. Where are we going to fund them?
Where do we go next?
Where do we go next? And the thing that was missing were the business leaders saying, I've got the capital, I've got the expertise, I will mentor, I'll invest, I'll partner, and I'm going to multiply myself. So that, again, that's spiritual multiplication. So that you've been given 5 talents or 10 talents, and that when God says, what did you do with it? It's, I doubled it, I tripled it, I quadrupled it. I took all the gifts you gave me and I gave those gifts to 10 other entrepreneurs, 50
Amen.
other entrepreneurs. And now they're doing great things for God and the church.
I love it.
That's the hope.
I love it. When you first talked to me about it, I was just pumped about it. I wish you only the best, and I'll help you in any way that I can, because I truly believe in it. People need a place where they feel they can trust the people, that they're not going to be taken advantage of. These are people that are hardworking, and their money, they made it the hard way, and so good for you. Pray for you, and that you be very successful in that endeavor, because we need that in the Catholic world. I think that you said it. We don't have that. We used to, but we don't have that now. And I think that you're gonna do it. So
I hope so.
Powerful story. I love your miracle story. I hope you share it more often. And just
thank you so much for this was a gift, and thank you for the time. Thank you for lunch.
Amen. So join me next Thursday for another guest here on Bless's Kitchen. Thank you for everybody who's watching. I get a lot of responses. I get emails. I get text messages. And I'm just thrilled about it. And I'm glad you're enjoying it. If you have any ideas or suggestions for guests for on Bless's Kitchen, just send them on. So I'll see you next Thursday. And God bless. Stay connected to your parish. See you. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you. That was awesome. Also, whoever found this Chick-fil-A